and be good to go.
Okay.
Dude, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm very excited to have you here to teach me all the things about Polkadot, and you, and just more about the blockchain in general.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I'm a little bummed that we had to reschedule this, because I'm quite sure that after we talk, I will immediately go buy Dot. And if we would have done that a week or two ago, as originally planned, I'd have more money than I have now.
Yeah, it's still early, so we'll see how
Yeah,
things go.
it's been a good few weeks, and a really exciting few weeks, for Polkadot, which we will super get into, hopefully in depth. But I want to start with your story into crypto. I got introduced to you through Sky King, who was like the first episode on the podcast, and who's like making great use of all of the technology that you're building.
Yep.
But I want to see how you got here, because I feel like everybody's got their own story.
Yeah, it's a crazy kind of path over the last. So the crypto part of my career has been 3.5 years. I'm originally from Indiana, and actually met Sky, who you just mentioned, at my first company that I worked for, which was Eli Lilly. So I started out in pharmaceuticals and was there doing mostly marketing, brand marketing for 4 years total. But when I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, and I did a 1-year master's program in information systems. And I remember I had a class about, I think it was an information security class. And we went into this topic about like the Tor Onion browser and like the deep web and Bitcoin. And I was just kind of mind blown by everything, and went home. I remember going into the deep web and seeing all this crazy stuff. And then I started doing, I had like only, I think 3 credit hours. So I started taking these Bitcoin courses with the Andreas Antonopoulos guy, who's one of the originals. And I didn't have any money back then to invest, unfortunately, but still was like, just thought it was really cool. So kept following crypto as a kind of a hobby during that pharmaceutical work, which I learned a lot there, but it wasn't what I was super passionate about. So I decided in 2017, after taking the GMAT like 3 times, was going to get my MBA.
Yeah.
And I had about 6 months off. So I left Eli Lilly. I traveled for a few months, which included a trip to Miami, to the North American Bitcoin conference. And my goal was like, I just went there alone. And I'm just going to go there and get thrown into this and try to find an internship before I went to the MBA. So I did exactly that. I went and got an internship with WanChain, which was like an interoperability platform back in 2018. And that's what took me from Indiana to Austin. So drove to Austin, was planning on, I rented this like long-term Airbnb and was just planning on living there for 2 or 3 months and then going to school. And a lot of stuff happened, and I ended up getting like much more responsibility than I expected in that internship. And they gave me a job offer out of nowhere, and we're like, you don't need to get your MBA. Stay in crypto. You won't regret it. So it was very difficult after how much work I did to get into these MBAs, and
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. But I ended up doing it. It was actually not that hard of a decision because I was taking out $200,000 in loans to go to school. So it was like, do I do a job that I might want after school, or do I just stay here? So yeah. And long story short, I went there, led their marketing for 1.5 years, and then started looking elsewhere as far as like where I saw kind of the tech going, and realizing more and more just how important the quality of the tech was. So that's what got me looking at Polkadot, which we can go into a little bit. And the organization behind Polkadot was Web3 Foundation. So I was looking at a couple other jobs, ended up going to Berlin for Web3 Summit, which is this epic crypto conference in Berlin. And went there, met the team, ended up finalizing that, and went on there full time to do kind of growth and community for Web3 Foundation / Polkadot. So we launched Polkadot while I was there. We also launched another network called Kusama. And that was another year and a half. And then the way Polkadot's set up is Polkadot's like this base layer infrastructure that connects a bunch of blockchains on top of it. So
yeah, we're gonna go real deep into
we
Polkadot.
are.
Yeah. But I want to do like two kind of quick checks on your story before we go in. So I think a lot of people who are kind of like hovering around crypto and watching it are still a little unsure of like how to get in. Listen to podcasts, read blog posts, sign up for newsletters. It sounds like maybe your gateway was just like, I just said YOLO and went to a conference and everything snowballed out of there. Like, do you recommend that for people of just show up at a conference and the world will like suck you down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. Conferences are hit or miss. If you want to work in crypto, there are so many ways to get involved. Like, for example, even at Acala, where I am right now, which is built on Polkadot, we can get into that. We've hired we've hired one guy who I knew because he was a Polkadot ambassador, which is an unpaid kind of volunteer position where you just like get involved and offer whatever skills you have. Another guy we hired, Brett. The first one's Josh. Then we hired Brett, and Brett did a Polkadot hackathon and just killed it. So we DM'd him on Discord. He was a Anon guy named Bread, and he had like a cat with a space suit on. And I just DM'd him and asked like what his story was. Turns out he was a 22-year-old kid who just graduated from college in Buffalo and was looking for a job, and just did this hackathon for the hell of it. And he was in the top 10 out of like, I think 1,000 people. So we ended up hiring him, and now he's a critical member of our team. So that's a couple examples. But what I'm trying to say is that you can go to just find something that interests you and go and just offer even free work, or just like getting involved in whatever way you can. And once you prove your value, then it's pretty easy to get hired once you do that. But yeah, to your point, conferences are a good way. There's a lot of good conferences in the US. There's definitely plenty in Europe and in Asia too. So good way to meet people in person. But nowadays you don't really need to meet people in person, but it always helps to do that.
And a huge variety of ways to contribute too. Definitely it's not like design or engineer or get the fuck out. There's a lot of work to do in a lot of different disciplines, and all skills are necessary.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, engineers are in high demand, but like I came from marketing, and it's very hard to understand like the deep technical stuff. Like I actually compare it. Yeah. Like I compare it to my previous job. Like in pharmaceuticals, I was marketing products that I had, of course, no idea how the chemistry worked on the back end with the chemists in the lab who invented these molecules. It's the same thing in blockchain. There's these brilliant engineers building these blockchain protocols that I can't come close to fully grasping. But if you can understand how it works at the basic level and then help communicate that in a way that people can understand, then you've done most of the job.
Yeah, I think this just the stage that we are at is like attracts the people who talk technical details and talk jargon. And one of the things I really enjoy about that is like there's so much value to be created just by understanding at a very high level, like what does this technology make possible, and like sharing that with people, and just helping them start to imagine the future. This is one of those things that like technology that snuck up on us. Like nobody was thinking about like, oh, it'll be cool when that happens. It just happened. It's not like we don't have sci-fi about the blockchain. So it's just connecting all those dots.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the internet. We're building protocols and base layer platforms that are going to enable things that we can't even come close to predicting. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch it develop.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about the origin of Polkadot, and maybe start with Gavin Wood.
Yeah. Yeah. And even going back a little further, the origin of Ethereum, which led to the origin of Polkadot. So, I mean, so everyone I'm sure knows Bitcoin, that got everything started. And then Ethereum came along and added programmability or smart contracts to be able to essentially program money or build applications on these decentralized systems. And by decentralized, we essentially mean that it's built on a technology stack that isn't owned by a company like Facebook or Apple or Google, where you could just go to their servers and shut them down, or they could go to your account and change your name on Facebook. This is being built on a global network of servers or computers that are helping run this distributed network. It's really fascinating what's happening with this.
Is a good analogy email. Like nobody can shut down email if they wanted to, and in the same way, Ethereum is like this open protocol for computing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, in a way, but yeah. So the email protocol that allows like Gmail to work is like SMTP, but Google owns our email accounts. So if they wanted to delete all my emails, they can, because they own that server that it's stored on. I guess it would be like if imagine like an email server that you run yourself in your house and you're the only one who has access to those emails. That's kind of more like what's being built now, is because you actually own your data and information on these blockchains.
Okay. Okay. So Ethereum's innovation on top of Bitcoin was to basically add a programming language so that it can facilitate all of these apps with smart contracts and do a lot more than just transfer value back and forth. So what does Polkadot build on top of or adapt Ethereum into?
Yeah, so Vitalik Buterin was the one who wrote the white paper originally for Ethereum. And then he found another guy named Gavin Wood, who was a coder. So Gavin actually coded Ethereum based on what Vitalik had written up in the white paper. He actually said that he built it in 3 weeks, which is pretty unbelievable, the first version of Ethereum. So Gavin and the team built and launched Ethereum. He also created the Solidity programming language, which is still used for building all these applications on Ethereum. But started to realize that there was going to be, number one, scalability issues. So this is back in like 2015, 2016. And being the kind of brilliant visionary that he is, was looking forward to today where we are. And some people may have heard about these gas or transaction fee issues that Ethereum's having. It's so expensive to do anything. But he predicted that back in 2016 and kind of went his own way and built Polkadot to help solve some of these problems, including scalability. So the other major challenge that Polkadot is seeking to solve is you can kind of compare it to the internet. So there's actually, going back to that class I had in college, there's actually physical wires that go under the ocean that connect the US to Europe for the internet. And these internet systems in the US and Europe can obviously work together. You can send an email overseas in seconds. But where the blockchain ecosystem is still to a certain extent is all these networks are kind of these isolated regions or islands that aren't connected. So you can't send information or value between these chains. Or these blockchains or these networks. We have to get to the point where we have the same thing as the global internet, where everything is completely connected and interoperable. And that's one of the biggest things that Polkadot's also seeking to change, where it's not just one network or one blockchain. What Polkadot is this whole universe of up to 100 connected blockchain networks. So they're all kind of plugging into this core to the network. And through that, they get kind of out of the box the ability to communicate with any other network that's connected to Polkadot.
Okay. Brief recap, and then we'll continue. So Gavin Wood, incredibly instrumental in the founding of Ethereum, basically built the whole first thing. And the Infinite Machine is a book by Camilla Russo. It's just like a hilarious account of this whole thing, because it's an incredible drama with the early team and all of the innovations that went into creating Ethereum, like legal and technical and community, and all of it it's truly an amazing story. And Gavin features kind of prominently in that, obviously. So I definitely I understand the problem, because you should have seen my face the first time I realized you can't swap Bitcoin for Ethereum, because those are two different chains. And it just like, I'm just like sitting there trying to figure out how to do this. And it didn't even occur to me that this is a problem, which sounds dumb to anybody more than 3 months into really understanding crypto. But for most people who are new to the space, I think, it's not obvious necessarily when you come from an internet that's already interoperable that these chains are actually distinct networks, and you have to go through kind of clumsy bridges to go from one network to the other. So the interoperability problem is I definitely identify with, and Polkadot's solution, at least as I understand it, and please correct or expand me here, is that there's basically, they build a fundamental technology that they expect all other people to build their blockchains on top of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So just like Gavin built Solidity for Ethereum, he built this thing called Substrate, which is like a blockchain development framework for Polkadot. So it's basically like a framework for you to essentially choose from a menu of different components that you would want to build into a blockchain to customize it for a specific purpose. So another thing about Polkadot is it's kind of a bet on customization of these networks instead of generalization. Because right now Ethereum got so big, there's so much great work that's been done there, but there's everything from NFTs to finance to gaming, insurance, everything's trying to be built on the same generic blockchain. Whereas with Substrate, you can basically spin up your own chain and customize it for whatever you want to focus on. So if you're a gaming company or gaming application, you could build a blockchain that is optimized for, let's say, speed, instead of optimizing for things like security, because it's a game.
Sure.
So this is kind of what Substrate enabled, is the ability for people to spin up their own networks. Okay.
So other approaches to solving that problem are something like Thorchain, right? Which is so they are taking like existing blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum and trying to build a layer zero, I guess is that the term for it, like below them, to build almost a substrate or create interoperability between existing chains. Is that also Polkadot's approach, or are these like separate approaches to the same problem? Polkadot's is about building a new set of blockchains around this new sort of central substrate versus coming and adding something that has to work with everything, the existing blockchains.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in Thorchain, but even the way you described it, so since it's working with existing networks, so Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are previously existing networks that it's trying to connect in some sort of DeFi, decentralized finance setup. With Polkadot, it's more of these are all blockchains that are kind of natively built with similar technology instead of completely different tech. And then for working with existing networks like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, there will be bridges to those. So it's not only Polkadot, only isolated to that, but there will be the ability to bridge to things like Bitcoin and Ethereum from Polkadot as well.
Okay. So chains can like move onto Polkadot. It's not like they have to have been started there already.
Through bridges, you can if you were built with something besides Substrate. But most of the teams that are going to be launching on Polkadot built with the framework, like basically for Polkadot called Substrate.
Okay. Where did the name Polkadot come from? It is by far the cutest blockchain name. I feel like everything else is like Avalanche, or Terra. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a story that even the name of Polkadot and Kusama, I don't know too well. Part of it was probably like with Polkadot, it's like connecting the dots. That's probably maybe part of where the name came from. Kusama is actually, I think, a much cooler name. The like Polkadot's kind of sister network, because there's an artist named Yayoi Kusama from Japan, super famous globally, and all of her artwork is done with Polkadots. So the name of that kind of inspired the naming for Kusama Network, which is kind of cool.
What does Kusama do? What is the sister network?
Yeah, this is actually a whole nother rabbit hole, but
Maybe I shouldn't have asked. I don't know.
it's I can explain it in a simple way.
Okay.
The traditional path for these software developers is they build, like, let's say, an application on a test network with no money, no value on it, and they launch it on the main network. And there's a lot of times like unpredictable things that go wrong when it goes to the main network when money is involved
Sure.
that they could never have predicted on the test net.
Yeah, the blockchain version of it worked on local, but now I have to push to production. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Kusama is a step in between testnet and mainnet. It's like an experimental network with real value on it. So it's this new model that Gavin and them created where you go from testnet to Kusama, and in Kusama there's real value there, so you can make sure things don't go wrong, but the value is about 10 times less than that of Polkadot. So by the time something makes it to the third step and on Polkadot, it's nearly perfect, and been kind of battle tested quite a bit. So
yeah, not non-catastrophic bugs on Kusama.
Yep.
But Kusama is not something that necessarily like consumers need to know or interact with. They would be.
Some will be, but Polkadot
okay.
will always be kind of the primary network.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the interface with Polkadot like today? Where are we at? And like people are starting to use it and apps are starting to launch on it.
Yeah. So Polkadot has been launched now for a little over a year, and what has been live so far is mostly there's governance. So the decision making for the future of the network is actually all decided what we call on chain, or it's voted on using and actually tracked like through the actual blockchain, instead of the different method is off-chain governance, which is essentially just people arguing in chat rooms, and like three people who have access to the code can actually make the change. So on-chain governance is definitely where the future is going to be. That's one thing. Polkadot also has something called staking. So you can essentially like lock up your DOT tokens and earn about 12 to 15% on yield on that, because you're essentially helping to provide additional security to the network by locking those DOT tokens. So that's been going on for the past year or so. But Polkadot on its own is nothing without these blockchains that it's connecting. And we call these blockchains parachains. But there has been no blockchain launched on Polkadot yet. And that's what's about to happen actually on Thursday this week. So on November 11th, the auctions begin. And that is a whole new kind of method for launching startups and like community backed launches for startups that are it's super interesting, and maybe we can get into that.
Yeah, that's well, what an amazing moment to be having this conversation. It's like the soft launch of so tell me about what is the auction mechanism for?
Yeah. So if people are aware of what happened with these initial coin offerings or ICOs that happened on Ethereum and several other blockchains back mostly like 2017, 2018, it was an exchange of value. So I would send, for example, Ethereum to an address, God knows where, and then I would just pray that team would actually send me something back in return.
Yeah,
that was an ICO, and a lot of times it ended poorly. A lot of times the team could just collect the ETH, and they had no accountability for actually delivering on what they were promising.
And even well-intentioned teams, there was just like buggy, clumsy like implementations of ICOs, and some of them were like, oh, we're going to collect $10 million, but didn't cap it, and so they ended up collecting like $80 million of ETH on accident, and then like trying to figure out how to get it back, and then or their account got hacked right after they there's a ton of those stories in the Infinite Machine too, and there are they're wild. So I definitely understand the need for an evolution in that mechanism.
Yeah, so that context is important because that's kind of the learnings from that are kind of what led to these what are called parachain slot auctions. So I mentioned that these blockchains that are launching on Polkadot are called parachains, and they each have a slot in the network. It's like a parking spot. And these roll out one at a time. So there will be up to 100 blockchains connecting to Polkadot, but we're about to start this auction to basically earn the right to launch in slot number 1 on Polkadot. So there's a bunch of teams lined up, like ready to go, and they want to launch on Polkadot. And now it's just a matter of who can gather the most amount of DOT, because DOT is required. The Polkadot token is required to bid in this auction. Whoever has the highest bid in auction number 1 after 7 days wins the auction and then earns the right to launch on Polkadot. So this is a kind of a take on ICOs, because it forces teams like us to, first of all, there's a lot of skin in the game, a lot of work that's required to launch. Instead of an ICO, it was very easy to just spin up a website and just collect money. The other aspect is this is not just the teams bidding with their own DOT. What happens is, imagine, just to make a comparison to the real world, imagine in an auction for a house, you go to the auction with your own checkbook, and if it reaches a point where you don't have the money to afford that, then you're out of the auction as an individual. But imagine coming to the same auction with crowd-funded funds from your family, friends, neighbors, whoever wanted to get involved. You have a way more competitive bid in that auction to win that house. The same thing happens in these auctions for these teams that want to launch on Polkadot. They're not going to go to the auction with their own DOT. They are going to do something called a crowd loan, and they will get all this DOT from the community all over the world who agree to basically loan them their DOT in return for that network's token. So every parachain that's launching has their own cryptocurrency that's required to do transaction fees on the network in order to operate these applications that are being built, and several other things, but just most basic is transaction fees.
Okay. All right. A few either questions or clarifications on that. One, I think DOT is the native token for Polkadot and the like sort of medium of exchange for all the stuff that goes on here. I think it's also, I think we're saying, so your context in this ecosystem is as Acala, one of the companies bidding on that first spot.
Exactly.
So you are building a company essentially, or a network, or like what, I don't know how you would identify it.
Network.
A network. Okay. To build on Polkadot. And so you're like trying to win this auction so that you can be the first to launch your network on Polkadot.
Exactly.
And how does the network, I want to come back to the auction, because there's definitely some things that I want to explore there, because it's a very interesting mechanism. But what is the difference in identification of you as a network versus you as a company?
Well, yeah, that's something that is the case really in most crypto projects. So a company is a centralized entity that maybe has to register in Delaware or anywhere, in the world. A network, there's a core team of 4 founders, and then there's people like me who are kind of core contributors to the network. But as soon as we launch Acala on Polkadot, it will be, just like you said with Ethereum, an infinite machine. These are unstoppable decentralized networks that can't be shut down. It's not a company, it's a network, it's a platform that is open. The code is open source. You can build applications on it, and there's no one place. It's not like it's registered in Delaware. It's a network operated by people all over the world.
Okay. And with varying degrees of involvement too, right? Like you'll remain a core contributor. There's people who are sort of, I don't know, freelance or independent periodic contributors. And there's people who are extremely, part-time probably, or ambassadors or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a wide range of people contributing. Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Would you distinguish this from a DAO, or do you think is like network and DAO sort of somewhat the same in this context?
So just, I guess, to confuse you even more, there's a DAO.
Please bring it on.
So Acala has a DAO built into the network.
Okay.
Which is pretty fascinating. And that's already the DAO is already holding like now probably over $80 million in DOT. And that allows the network itself to fund development, security, even marketing, if it's voted on by all the ACA token holders in governance decisions. So it's essentially like a, I don't know, like a treasury for the network itself to fund its own growth.
Okay.
So that's the DAO aspect, and the governance is similar to DAOs too.
Okay, so the DAO lives within the network and supports its growth. But you work for the network, not necessarily the DAO. So the DAO is like a small, like, I don't know, a council or something within.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. My brain's scrambled egg on this topic. We'll
Yeah.
all right, let's go back to the auction.
Yeah.
So how does Acala function, like approach, you've got an auction in a week or in a few days. How long have you been preparing for this? Like, what does the playbook look like? And what happens sort of if you win? Are you just like, what's the auction mechanism work? What happens if you win? Like, what are you giving and what are you getting? So talk me through what happens.
I'll finish the idea around the crowd loan. So to take it back to that example I gave, where you're basically crowdfunding money together. The same thing happens here. We will be very soon, and I think when this podcast comes out, this will already have been open. But it's this crowd loan will be open, and we will basically be, Acala will be able to accept DOT contributions from anyone in the world. They're agreeing to lock their DOT for 2 years, which is the duration of this like lease to launch on Polkadot. But in return, they get ACA, which is Acala's token. So that's like the trade-off. But then the reason why this is a better take on ICOs is that it's called a crowd loan, because after 2 years, all of that original DOT contribution is returned automatically. So you get your DOT back and you keep whatever ACA or any other network's token that you got when they launched. So that's how the crowd loan works. And that's how we get enough DOT to be competitive in that auction. So
interesting. So this is a popularity contest that you're in, where you're collecting DOT from the Polkadot community. So if I own 10 DOT, you really want me to stake with you so that I can lock up my 10 DOT with you for 2 years. You give me some ACA tokens for the privilege of me giving you my DOT. And then in 2 years, I get my DOT back and I get to keep the ACA that you gave me. And my risk exposure there is that the price of both of those things goes way down. What happens if somebody gives you their DOT and then you don't win is it conditional on you winning the auction?
Exactly.
Okay.
If we don't, you actually get, they come out in batches of 5. So you get 5 chances to win an auction. If you don't win one of those, then the DOT's automatically returned to people.
Interesting. But I can only stake my 10 DOT with one network per auction. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
And the other, so I mentioned earlier, but with the staking, so DOT staking is incredible, like 12-15%. You have to unstake your DOT in order to contribute to these crowd loans. So that is the trade-off, is you lose the staking rewards. So USD price aside, what the trade-off is you're actually betting on the value of the new token you're getting from that parachain that you supported to be higher than the staking returns would have been on those DOT. But like you said, if the price of DOT in the whole market came down, you also wouldn't have the liquidity of that DOT to, for example, sell if you wanted to. But a lot of people actually look at it on the flip side. It's like a forced hold. It's like a forced long-term hold on such a new and high potential asset. So
yeah, I mean, I'm full disclosure and pretty obviously, given I think this conversation, like a fan of buying tokens and one as an investment opportunity, I think, and hashtag not financial advice, and B, like staking them as just a long-term, there's not a lot of assets that you can buy that appreciate that then return on top of that appreciation. It's a little bit of a double dip that seems to be almost a given in Web3 that is not at all a given in sort of traditional finance. Like if you own an equity, you're not necessarily earning there's no way to stake like that equity or double dip it or
Yeah,
return on
exactly.
it beyond like it's either dividends or appreciation. Um, okay. So who else is bidding on these spots? Like who are you competitive with these other networks?
Yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting dynamic because we're like friends with a lot of these people, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
all these teams, all the early teams, we see each other at conferences in person now, online. But at the same time, we all want to launch on Polkadot. So there is a little bit of a friendly competition going on, but the cool part is there everyone's going to get a chance to launch. Maybe not first, but everyone will. So we want everyone to get launched. We want as many successful parachain teams on Polkadot as possible because that means we'll be more successful. But yeah, the crowd launch or the parachain auctions are. I mean, there's a competition element there that's kind of fun.
How often do they do auctions?
Um, so these will be doing five in a batch of five and actually back to back to back. So they're 1 week auctions. So there'll be 5 weeks in a row.
Oh,
And then I believe the next five will potentially start even right after those. So it's going to go through Christmas, through New Year, and into January. And then these things can be stopped and started through the governance system. So
mm-hmm.
maybe they'll take after the first 10, maybe they'll take a month and just like assess, like make sure everything is stable and then continue scaling up. But
So people are going to be locking up their dot for 2 years at a time in these first auctions, but we're about to run 2 years of potentially back to back to back to back auctions of 100 different parachain spots on Polkadot.
yeah, if there's enough teams ready, at this point, there's definitely not 100 teams that are
Okay.
ready to launch entire blockchains. It's more like I don't know, 15, 20.
Okay.
Um, but I think once that happens, and like that is really the ultimate, finish of the Polkadot launch is when all these teams start to launch, and there will be huge growth in like the amount of developers and new interests. So I expect that to grow pretty quickly over the next couple of years, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it'll take 2, 3 years to scale up to 100.
So are you, and is the 100 arbitrary?
It's a theoretical max based
Mm.
on like research from the Web3 Foundation team. That's based on the current tech kind of
Okay.
architecture. That could always change. Polkadot can be upgraded fairly easily. So there's already concepts out there about how to
Sure.
scale past 100.
Okay. This is a not financial advice question, but should everybody just be like buying dots like their lives depended on it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely very bullish on Polkadot in general. One, I guess, like a tokenomics type of phenomenon with Polkadot that's interesting is with these parachain auctions, when we as Acala launch, our entire crowd loan that we raised is locked away and basically pulled out of the circulating supply of DOT.
Mm-hmm.
So if we raise, I don't know, 500 million or $1 billion in this crowd loan, that will all be locked away and pulled out of the dot supply, but then every other parachain team will be locking more and more dot. So that puts a supply pressure on the circulating supply. I'm not a finance guy, but it's got to have some kind of an impact on the token.
And the market cap of Polkadot today, as we're talking, is like 58 billion.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it's game theoretically smart to name like what do you think your bid size will come in at?
Well, the only data we have to make a guess is from Kusama
Hmm.
because, as I mentioned, all the stuff that we're doing on Polkadot has already been done
Hmm.
once. So
Okay.
we actually won the first auction on Kusama about 3 months ago, and in that one we raised 5% of the entire KSM supply in our one crowd loan. So
Shit.
if we do that on Polkadot, it would be I think over 2 or 3 billion. I
Yeah.
don't I personally don't think that would be very difficult to do. But there's a chance that it could be pretty high.
Yeah. Okay, so that seems like an appropriate segue to actually explain what Acala is.
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess going back to the discussion around like customization instead of generalization, Acala is an entire blockchain built customized for decentralized finance. So we will have this whole kind of ecosystem. We sometimes refer to it as like the app store for finance. Imagine like you got the app store, you've got all these apps like building on this platform that Apple provided. In that case, it's a like a Web2 centralized thing. But in this case, it's a decentralized platform, but you'll have all these finance applications building in this ecosystem or this economy that all can work together. And what they're building on, the blockchain, is able to be customized specifically for DeFi. So some of the more prominent products in the Ethereum ecosystem, you have to have a stable coin for all these products to build around. And with everything going on in like regulatory environment right now around US dollar backed stable coins, it's very risky because there's so much risk of central authorities dabbling with your stablecoin, which is very risky for building DeFi products around products that are centralized by nature.
It is pretty funny to watch everybody yell about like inflation is coming, you have to buy crypto, and then everybody in the crypto world pegging their stable coins to the US dollar.
Exactly.
It's like, okay.
So one of the products we built is similar to what MakerDAO built for Ethereum, which is called DAI, DAI. And we've built the Acala dollar, AUSD, as a decentralized stable coin. So not backed by real dollars, it's backed and collateralized by crypto assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, DOT, and others. So this is what the whole ecosystem is kind of built around. And that stablecoin is built into our blockchain itself. So anyone building applications on Acala can kind of natively out of the box leverage that. We've also built a decentralized exchange into the chain. So imagine like Uniswap being built into Ethereum's blockchain, and then anyone building on Ethereum being able to leverage the liquidity of that exchange out of the box. And the last thing we mentioned earlier, we were talking about staking. And when you stake DOT, you have to lock the DOT away. And it's essentially useless besides the yield that it's getting, the 12 to 15%. But we've actually built a liquid staking derivative. So you can stake your DOT and get this L DOT, which is a liquid DOT that's liquid, and you could go use that for additional yield in DeFi applications and what have you. So those are the three kind of core products built into Acala and kind of what make it a decentralized finance focused blockchain. And then the other just key thing to mention is that there's an Ethereum virtual machine, an EVM, which is essentially like a place for onboarding Ethereum teams who have already built an application and spent all this time building for Ethereum. We give them kind of that same environment. So it's very easy to just take that and launch it on Acala and Polkadot more broadly. So that's kind of the Acala in a nutshell.
Okay. That was maybe a little too master's degree and not enough high school cafeteria for this particular podcast.
Yeah.
So what is Acala going to be used, or is the intent that Acala is used directly by consumers? Or
yes.
Okay.
So
I'll have like a wallet with Acala or a wallet with Polkadot or both.
There's a Polkadot wallet that works with every blockchain that will connect to it.
Okay.
So it's like multi-chain. But I think even more interestingly, you'll have consumers, and these are DeFi users, so they're pretty entrenched in crypto if they're using some of this stuff, especially like these staking things that I'm talking about. But the consumers that I'm most excited about interacting with are actually consumers in non-crypto applications that will be unknowingly benefiting from crypto. So let me give an example of that. There's a company in New York City called Current, who I didn't know about until we started working with them. Current.com is a neobank or a fintech company with about 3 million customers in the US. And they have this customer base of people who are kind of newer to the financial system, and they're using Current for pretty much just a basic savings account. So they earn like 0.5%. They have their app on their phone. Maybe they contribute like $50 a month, and they're good. But Current came to us and we're like, hey, we've been watching everything in crypto for like 6 years. We've been watching the launch of Acala and Polkadot, and we want to build a tool with you guys so that we can kind of connect our fintech application to your decentralized finance ecosystem or economy, and provide the yield that you're able to generate in this crypto world to our users on Current. So what it could look like, and the details of what it's kind of called and branded haven't been finalized, but just as an example, I could open up my Current app one day and just a pop-up comes up and it says, would you like to sign up for Current yield? And maybe it's 3% or 4% instead of 0.5%. But those dollars are actually flowing out of Current's bank account into what we call an on-off ramp, which basically converts US dollars to crypto. That will go into Acala and earn yield and all these different things that are probably too complicated to talk about, but we can earn like 12, 15% in some cases. This will then be able to be sold or liquidated and sent back through that on-off ramp into US dollars and then distributed to current.com customers. So they're earning this 3-4% yield from DeFi, but they don't have to use all these complicated tools and worry about all these passwords and stuff. So super exciting for me to bring crypto to the masses in a way that's very user friendly and something that they're already used to using.
Yeah, and so that's all built on Acala, correct?
Yeah,
or will be. That's a super exciting vision and something that I'm really curious about seeing how this unfolds, right? Like how much of Web3 is going to be like, the strong form where everybody's got a wallet and everybody's got their private keys, and we all have to go through this painful like process of onboarding and understanding how all these new things work and waiting for transactions to clear. And it's just a whole new world of things to learn. And how much will like Web2 interfaces, I guess, just kind of learn to build on top of Web3 infrastructure and bring some of those like benefits to people without them even really realizing like what's going on in the back end. Do you have a strong vision on that?
I just think that, this one example is a perfect, example of where things are headed, because for people like my parents and my family, even like all of my friends who aren't crypto people, like it's just way too difficult for people to wrap their head around how all of this works. If you can just somehow bring the benefits of crypto, which are, for me, better ways of earning more yield on things like $1. To be honest, like very little in banks anymore. Like if I can hold a stable coin in, say, BlockFi for 8% or Anchor Protocol on Terra for 20%, like why would I be holding money in the bank? So this is where it's really exciting to me to bring those benefits to existing platforms. So think about like these fintech companies, banks, the websites and apps that everyone already is used to using, but being able to bring those benefits to those applications.
Yeah, I think that's super, super exciting. And I hope it can, I do hope it can happen without having to onboard the whole world into wallets and all of the confusing like micro tragedies that can happen when everyone is like individually responsible for everything. Like I think there's a good reason why we have some central authority around a lot of this stuff. Like how often I fucking have to reset my password? Like
exactly.
I don't know that I want to be the only one with one key to my whole net worth. Like there's we figured some stuff out there. And I think we can get the best of both worlds. So
there's a reason.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's a reason why Coinbase was the first huge crypto IPO, because look what they do. You have a username and you have a password, and people are much more comfortable trusting Coinbase for better or worse, but that's what people are used to, and that's what most people prefer.
And with how many people have lost their keys, and like plenty of people I know who are early to crypto and just threw away a hard drive or lost their private keys or whatever. Yeah, I'm not as sure as some of the zealots that decentralization is like the killer app and value proposition of a lot of this stuff. Actually, I understand the benefits of it for sure, and the increasing the reason to pay attention to it. But I don't think it's obvious that like that should be everyone's number one variable to consider when they're making a decision about an app or a purchase or a currency or something. So there's a little bit back to Polkadot, but what has to happen for Polkadot to succeed in like the broader crypto ecosystem? Like, how does it sit with respect to like the Ethereum ecosystem or the Bitcoin ecosystem? Like, there's a lot of dogmatism around chains or networks, and it's really unclear to me how that all unfolds. And I think Polkadot's a really interesting kind of newcomer to that space, and just like, how do you see those all interacting?
Yeah. I just think that we're still pretty early on in the evolution of this new industry, and what's happening now is there's just so much more openness to all these different teams and blockchains and ecosystems working together. So that's really what Polkadot's built for, is to connect all these networks. And we will, like I mentioned, be bridging to existing networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, even Terra, Solana, a lot of these up and coming blockchains. So I think if you fast forward like 2-3 years, we're all going to be around still. I think all this stuff you'll be growing your own community, your own developer community, your own kind of system, ecosystem of applications, and everyone benefits from being connected. So I think down the line, there's just going to be all these different teams building out their own operations, but being able to, send information and value back and forth between Ethereum and Polkadot, and connecting. Even when ETH2 comes out, this whole new Ethereum world, connecting Ethereum 2 and Polkadot will be massively valuable, and is almost inevitable. It's going to happen. So for Polkadot to be successful, just going back to your question, a lot of it is around just general adoption of the technology. So there needs to be a lot of focus on making the user experience or the developer experience very easy, doing things like hackathons, just growing the developer community is probably the most important thing. Then on my side, I think education is extremely important, because like I mentioned, like this is all just so technical, and for people to really adopt this, you need to educate people in a way that they can understand.
And where do you send people who want to kind of start to self-educate and play around with this kind of stuff?
Most of crypto kind of lives on Twitter, so that's a good place to start by for general crypto people, you can kind of even Google that, who to follow. But yeah, getting involved in just discussions there. There's plenty of really good YouTube videos for some of these basic concepts. If you get into DeFi, there's some really good YouTube channels on like DeFi, decentralized finance concepts. So yeah, a lot of people use videos, and then just kind of, hanging out in these communities, like on Twitter and on Discord. Sometimes there's a lot of chatter. So yeah.
Discord seems to be the hub for a lot of this stuff too. Like a lot of things come together once you start poking around in some of the Discord communities. So and you'll find links to those on most projects' Twitter accounts. That tends to be my like kind of process. Even the Discords are like a little bit chaos, but you can definitely find links to all the docs, and people answer your questions and stuff.
I still haven't figured out how to really effectively use Discord, because if you're in like 10 Discord servers, it's impossible to follow.
Oh yeah. It's completely, I feel like I'm going to have a seizure every time I open it, but I still keep adding different Discord servers and not being able to keep up with all of them. And I got like a tab open with 4,582 notifications or whatever the fuck. It's insane. But I think it is also really exciting because the stuff is available to everybody, and for maybe the first time ever, right? Like instead of the startups that are going to change the world getting founded in one or 5 specific cities and being funded by, a few hundred people with access. These companies are getting created in Discords now by people all over the world. And
Yep.
it is a much more meritocratic process of like, if you can dig into these companies and find out what's going on and develop an opinion about the future, and, put in $10 or $100 or $1,000 into the right projects early on, and then put your mouth where your money is, and start pushing a shoulder against these things and helping them and building them. Almost everybody in the world can be a VC now, and can be a startup employee now. And crypto, part of it is technical, and new capabilities, but I think a lot of it is also cultural, about like what's changing. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, there's just, I don't think there's ever been an industry that has been so accessible to the general public, in terms of, like you were mentioning, these earlier rounds of funding. Normally everyone you wait for the IPO, you buy the IPO, but by then you're already buying at 100x what the guy in San Francisco was investing in the Series A for, so it's really cool to see. Of course, there's always going to be venture capital money flowing into these businesses, but everyday people are now able to back these companies right alongside the big big venture capital firms. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting phenomenon with crypto.
And we're still ahead of a lot of institutions. Like I talk to friends who, run private money, and like, because of their charters, they're not allowed to invest in, speculative assets, or they don't know how to custody crypto or something like that. They can only buy, stocks or private companies or equities. And so this is something where I'm seeing individuals, and especially family offices, really like get a huge jump on institutions. That's changing, and definitely going to change over the next couple of years, I think. But yeah, it is very, very, very exciting.
Sure.
What I'm not sure is, I mean, like, there's downsides to all of that too, but I don't know. It is a really exciting future, and the fact that it's all kind of perfectly liquid and changing all the time. This is just going to be, I think it's easy to underestimate the impact of this. Like we're coming for a whole nother new revolution that may actually feel way, way bigger in impact than Web 2. So as somebody who's been in this space for a few years, like, let's try to push the timeline of predictions as far out as you can, like, comfortably speculate. And you don't have to be right, but like, let's just dream for a minute about what like 10 or 20 years in the future could look like.
That's a really tough one. Yeah, 10, 20 years. Yeah.
I think it's the equivalent of like trying to predict in 2001 that Amazon will be $1 trillion company that like serves every company on earth in 20 years. But it's maybe the most fun question to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually probably should think about that question even after this. But I think where some of these trends are going, I guess on the finance and DeFi side, I mean, 20 years there could start being pressure on even the need for things like banks, with all this stuff being built on a decentralized blockchain or multiple blockchains. The banks are becoming irrelevant over time. The other thing that is happening now, which I don't necessarily like, the whole metaverse and kind of like this living in this virtual world. There's so much money flowing into the metaverse now. If you think about like these VR worlds, I was listening to another podcast with the lady from A16Z, and she was talking all about the metaverse, and like just an example she gave was really interesting. Just a small example of, you go into this virtual world and you're hanging out with your friends that you maybe met on the internet, and there could be a movie theater in the virtual world, and you could actually go to a movie and pay $8 or $10 to watch that movie in the virtual world, and somebody owns that theater in the virtual world. Like that one example kind of opened my eyes, like, wow, you can literally do almost anything in this metaverse and charge for it. And the people will have revenue streams coming from these virtual worlds that people are going to in their living room through VR or through their computers or through their cell phones. So that the reason why I said I don't love it is just it's a little bit, it's just a little bit strange to think of, like, hopefully not me, but my kids or even their kids, like living these lives that are in, I don't know, in this virtual world. It's a little bit scary, to be honest, but um, that's definitely kind of where things are going. And COVID kind of sped that up, where everyone's so used to now living online and not seeing people. But hopefully there will always be that aspect of reality, which is why I think AR is way cooler than VR, because you can kind of blend the two worlds.
Yeah. If Elon Musk is right that we are living in a simulation, there would be nothing funnier than watching everybody who's in a simulation develop their own simulation to then put themselves inside the simulation that you created for them.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe that's 30 or 40 years.
All right. I know you got to go. You got auctions to win. You got networks to launch, treasuries to manage. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. If you got any last stuff you want to share with us, I mean, about how to support Acala in the coming auction, or get involved, I'd love to hear it, but I don't want to keep you too long. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, that's about it. If you're interested in Polkadot or Acala, getting involved, even there's the ambassador programs that you could look into. Yeah, definitely get on Twitter. You can follow Polkadot and Acala. My handle is Dan Reecer _. I should talk about things other than Polkadot, but I talk a lot about Polkadot. And yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do it another time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm very excited to see where Polkadot is in a year with all these parachains launching, and everything that grows on from here. I came in with like extremely little knowledge and feel like I learned a lot today. So I really appreciate you dumbing it down for us.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. Talk to you later.
Thank you.